Hey everybody, it's Jason Blaha here, and it's time for the Q&As, and like I've been doing lately, I'm going to break this up into two parts to make it easier for you guys to digest, and so that I can fit longer questions in them down below. So let's go ahead and get this started. First question. Hey Jason, first of all, I am loving the amount of informative content lately, the ammo videos especially. Please, could you give some advice on correcting lifelong hyperlordosis? I suspect it developed due to a sedentary lifestyle. Now that I am lifting, it is hindering. A weak core doesn't help either, mind you. My progress and my lumbar is sore. I have done some research, but I'm curious to know what your thoughts are. Cheers. All right, brother, I agree with your assessment there. A sedentary lifestyle and a lack of mobility are what's really going to cause you a lot of problems with this. What I'm going to recommend that you do until you get it sorted, don't progress very much on the weight on anything that's going to load your spine, whether that's a squat or a deadlift or even a bent over barbell row. You need to spend a couple weeks really sorting this out. So I'm going to recommend that you do a lot of core work. Particularly a lot of non-moving core work like planks, weighted planks, things like that. I'm going to recommend that you do a lot of mobility work. Work on third world squats. Work on squatting to a box and just sitting there, stretching on a low box, maybe 8 to 10 inches off the floor, to where you can keep your spine in a good arched position. I'm going to recommend that you, again, do a lot of work for your hips, and most importantly, start stretching your hamstrings 2 to 3 times every single day. I want you to really work on your hamstring mobility and do all of that. Spend a couple of weeks doing that before you try to progress on anything. You might need to spend up to a month doing it, but if you do all of that right, you get that mobility down, you get your core strong, again, get your hips and your hamstrings nice and limber and flexible. This problem should go ahead and go away. It should alleviate itself, and then you'll be safe to progress. But yes, being sedentary for long periods of time, having a sedentary lifestyle, can absolutely wreck your mobility. And once you do become active, unless you go about it correctly and in a proper progressive way, it can really start to cause pains, and those pains can, interfere with your day-to-day life. They can get pretty intense. Things like the lower back strains from doing this can really interfere with your ability to even sit at a desk and do your job. They can just interfere with every aspect of your life, and in the worst case, they can lead to injury. So yeah, you need to really work on all that mobility, flexibility in your core before you really get into it hard. All right, next question. All right, this is the guy who I'm going to shorten this down because his girl was on my novice program and had a lot of success with it. And then he leads on with, she has this mechanical issue, but I don't have the experience to identify and correct it. On the squat, after she bottoms out and begins her ascent, her left hip rises just above her right hip. Her butt will basically do a brief tilt, then correct itself, and she finishes the rep. No pain reported. It takes a split second and happens over the distance of an inch or two. It's tough to describe much better than that. It's the only flaw I can see in her form, and I can only assume it's a weakness somewhere else. I've never seen anything quite like it, and I have no idea where to begin correcting it. Does this sound familiar at all to you? Perhaps there's a direction you can point me in. I don't even know where to look. All right, brother, this is actually not that big of a deal. It's really not a big deal. You may not need to ever correct it unless you really are really concerned about it and it's bothering you or bothering her, and you just want to make sure that everything is stable and even. She has an issue to where she's asymmetrical, most likely, meaning one of her legs is slightly longer than the other, maybe a half inch or so, or she has a different angle in her hip socket than the other one. One of them is a few degrees off in a different angle, or even, up to 5 degrees off. You have to remember, human hip socket angles have a lot of variability among our species, and even within the same actual ethnic groups. It's not even like people from one part of the world have different angles than others. No, the variability is massive even inside of a given ethnicity or region in the world. So it's not even that. We just vary a lot on that. And she might have gotten a case to where one of her hips has a different angle noticeably than the other. The best way to correct this is to find a foot position that corrects it, meaning adjust each of her feet, put a lighter weight on, just basically the heaviest weight you start to notice it, because she might not be doing it with every single weight. And you might even need to just trace on the floor or use markers on the floor so you can find her foot positions, and then take each foot and adjust it one at a time till you find which foot you either need to move forward at half inch, move out half an inch, move it in half an inch. One of those feet, there's going to be a spot to where you can position it slightly different to make up for the asymmetrical situation, and it will probably balance it out. It's just a matter of finding it and then remembering it and using it over time. So it's going to be a fact that one of her feet, if you just move it half inch or an inch in one direction, it will absolutely sort the issue out, because it's going to be a different angle and different torque because of something going on with the leg length or the hip on one of the sides versus the other, and that can totally be corrected and rebalanced out with just a slightly asymmetrical foot position to correct the physiological asymmetry. So give that a try if it's really a big deal to you. But honestly, if she's only doing it for a couple of inches of the range of motion, it's probably not a big deal. But if you're really concerned about it, that is how you could fix it. All right, next question. Can you distribute your max amount of muscle mass? For example, let's say you reach your natural max potential and you train less legs to improve your upper body. All right, brother, but when I saw the first part of the question, I already knew where you were going with the latter of basically you just don't want to train legs. You know what, man? If you don't want to train legs because you just don't want to train legs, it's your body. Do whatever you want. You don't need to come up with crazy theories or silly excuses to not train your legs. If it's something you just really hate doing, I don't recommend that you do it. I think the legs are more important than your upper body for overall health and fitness and all the reasons most people should probably be training. But it sounds like you're probably just concerned with show muscles, and there's no need to create bro science and nonsense that gets spread around for people in order to just do what you want to do. Just do whatever you want to do. There's no need to make excuses for it or come up with some pseudoscientific reason. Now, to answer the question, no, it won't matter. Your max muscle is not, because it's not like some limit of saying the human being can hold so much muscle and it's a total number of pounds it can hold. No, it's how much your frame can hold distributed among the bone that you have. If that makes sense, a given size frame, because you have a given amount of frame and muscle fibers distributed, they can hypertrophy so far unless you start causing fiber splitting with certain drugs or something else going on. They have a maximum thickness they can reach, and oftentimes the amount of muscle fibers and the volume they can hold is proportionate to the bones and the size of the frame that you have. That's why height becomes such a relevant factor, and things like shoulder width become such a relevant factor, because it's the amount of frame that you have to stretch the muscle across. If you choose to just leave certain parts of that frame untrained and not growing, it's not going to increase the potential. It's not going to increase the max potential of the muscle fibers somewhere else in your body. It's not going to increase the size of the frame that they have to spread across. So no, it's not going to help you in that way. You could argue that maybe you can at least gain slightly faster, not much, because you could recover quicker. Meaning if a person isn't training half of their body, all of their recovery resources are going to the other half. Well, that doesn't necessarily mean they're going to have a maximum size difference, but they might be able to recover slightly faster, just slightly, and train more often. So they could do a little more training for the body parts that they're concerned with, and they might grow slightly faster. Is it guaranteed that they will? No, but they might. So there could be some truth to this idea of, guys skipping legs to make their arms or chest grow faster. But I don't like to promote that idea because, for obvious reasons, I don't want people not training their legs. But again, there could be a recovery issue, but there absolutely isn't a maximum size issue. It doesn't work that way. All right, next question. Alex from Alphadestiny claims that deloads are overrated and unnecessary, and if so, then the need for a deload should be rather rare. He says that the desire for a deload should be 1 to 2 times per year max, and if you need a deload more often than that, your programming probably sucks. He uses himself as an example that he didn't take a deload in 2 years, yet he's injury/pain free and is making consistent progress while lifting heavy regularly without ever feeling banged up. What's your take on this? All right, I know who Alex is from Alphadestiny, but I don't watch his videos because, quite frankly, guys, I don't really watch YouTube Fitness. I watch YouTube Fitness basically only to see if what they're saying about me. Or when a problem's been pointed out and someone says, hey, this person's really giving some bad advice, they've got a big following, go check it out. That's usually when I check it out. Outside of that, I don't really watch it. I have other things to concern myself with. But that being said, there's a few different answers here. It's not about programming sucking. It's about how hard you're writing the envelope. Deloading becomes necessary when you are overreaching. That's the whole point. When you're messing with deloads, you're talking about using dual factor recovery methods, which means you push yourself to the limits beyond what your body can recover from, so that you overstimulate and then you can't recover. And when you start to reach the threshold to where you can no longer recover, or right at the bleeding edge of it, you do a deload so that you adapt to the extra work that you did in the previous weeks leading up to the deload finally, because your body then plays catch up. And it's a very accepted, very proven scientific method of training. It actually is the way to get the fastest maximum results. It does, however, like any maximum way of doing things, has potential risks. And it's not just about volume, it's about just sometimes the sheer intensity of what you're doing. For example, if you're deadlifting heavy at a high frequency, you're probably going to need to deload fairly often. It's that simple, because heavy, frequent deadlifting will push you into an overreaching state by itself, even if you did no other exercises. That alone is capable of doing it due to the nature of the exercise. So to say that because someone made great progress without using deloads isn't proof that dual factor recovery isn't a viable and valid method. So what the thing is, Alex is probably, I don't know what his routine looks like, but Alex is probably not overreaching. He is staying within his limits. He's probably not training to failure. He's regulating volume and keeping it pretty moderate, so keeping workloads moderate and focusing on just slow, steady, progressive overload. And if that's what he's doing, or slow, steady, like a linear style periodization, either one of those, if you do them slow enough and you keep everything in check, you're going to make continual progress without needing a deload, but you're also not going to make maximum progress. So that's really what it comes down to, is someone trying to make maximum progress. And you know what? For 90% of people, I think trying to make maximum progress is probably a waste. I think only about 5 to 10% of people who actually train have a legitimate reason to validate and really truly trying to make maximum gains, because they have some reason they're actually doing it beyond, hey, I just want to be big and jacked or strong. They're generally people who compete in something, in which case it becomes a serious issue. But non-competitors who do this recreationally, for hobby, for fun, to feel better, to get girls, to get guys, whatever the reason is, probably don't need to ride that bleeding edge. They don't need to focus on maximum progress. They just need to focus on good, solid, steady progress. There is a big difference between the two. All right, next question. Will your performance or strength immediately improve in the workout following a deload, or will it take a week to get used to heavier loads again? My strength decreased after I took a deload. Any reasons why? Yeah, very simple. You missed the timing of your deload. If you deloaded when you needed to, and at the correct time, and you actually overreached, or you got right on the bleeding edge of chronic overreaching, like you had overreached for a certain number of weeks, to the point to where had you trained that intensely for another week, you wouldn't have recovered at all, and you would have regressed, then you would have gotten stronger after the deload. Meaning, if you had gotten and you were progressing and you kept increasing and you pushed yourself to that bleeding edge to the point to where the next session or two your strength would have regressed, and instead you took a 1 week deload, when you came back you might have seen a 0.5% increase in performance in the next workout or two following the deload. That meant that you timed it right. The fact that you lost strength on a deload means that you either chronically overreached too long to the point to where your deload didn't give you full recovery, and therefore you didn't fully adapt to everything, and you also didn't stimulate new training as a result of it, so you regress slightly, you detrained. Or it means that you deloaded way too soon, meaning you hadn't really overreached. You were just training hard, but you hadn't overreached yet. And by failing to do any overreaching, what the deload effectively did is, again, let you detrain just slightly. So that's basically what happened. You just missed the timing of it. Either you didn't actually overreach, or you overreached excessively to the point to where the deload wasn't long enough for you to recover. All right, next question. Hi, Jason. I got into strength training in my mid-30s with a good training program and diet. Is there any reason why I couldn't achieve the 2-plate bench, 3-plate squat, and 4-plate deadlift standard you mentioned recently? Is there a cap on strength if you start training when you're older? Okay, brother, when you said that you couldn't I'm not sure what you meant, whether you're wondering if you weren't going to be able to one day, or if you had tried for several years and you failed to reach that, because you said you had started training in your mid-30s, and I don't know how old you are now, so maybe you simply didn't reach the goal. And you know what? That happens sometimes. I mean, mid-30s, you're already declining, your testosterone levels are declining, your connective tissue's getting older, recovery's getting lower. You simply might not be able to bounce back from having done no training at all, being sedentary and just now getting into training. You might not be able to bounce back to the point you were in your 20s enough to really make the progress you could have made. Meaning, yeah, you just waited too late to get maximum progress, but you know what? And again, that's going to be very individual. That's going to be based upon the individual's genetics and everything else as to if you'll be able to reach the same standards starting in your mid-30s or your 40s that you could have in your 20s or teens. But that's not going to affect everyone. It's going to be depending on genetics. And if you're one of the people who couldn't, and it's that simple. You just got in older. You have other things going on in your life, more important things. It doesn't allow you to focus entirely on your training, and you're just not going to recover and bounce back from your training the way these 20-year-olds are. And so you might not quite reach those standards, and you know what? That's okay. And that's why I made it very clear. Usually people starting in their late teens or up to mid-30s, like 35 at the latest, is who I say will reach those strength standards. And I start cutting it off around mid-30s because very few people are going to be able to. Now, there's a few who can, though, if they're just genetically gifted towards strength, genetically gifted towards gaining muscle mass or recovery. Someone starting later in life could still very well reach those, but they're going to need to have something to their advantage. They're going to be slightly better than average genetically to probably pull that off. Unless they go on TRT or something, in which case they'll probably be fine. They'll probably be able to do it on TRT, but if not, probably well over half of guys are going to probably fail to achieve that goal. And that's okay, because at least they're in training, at least they're in improving themselves, and they're going to be better for it in the long run. So if they fail to reach it, it's not a big deal. It's not the end of the world. All right, guys, but that's the end of part 1. I will talk to you guys later in part 2.